Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to DADCAW. It is 1:31 in the afternoon here in the East Coast of United States of America. Friday, January 3rd, 2020. First time I've actually had to say 2020 out loud, by the way. I made it 3 whole days before having to do that. So welcome to DADCAW. Welcome back. Indeed, it is a new year. And why not do it on the 3rd? I thought about doing it yesterday, but I just couldn't muster up the energy. And I feel like my energy levels have not really been where they were so far in this year. Obviously, very short sample size. But that's okay. We can make sweeping statements. We are allowed to do that. This is America. So one of the things that I wanted to discuss in this DADCAW is the whole concept of reinventing oneself or significantly changing one's expectations, life, whatever, over the new year. I feel like most people have reached some sort of conclusion where they look at that and they look at that concept and they think logically it's, just another day. It's just, all you're doing is changing some numbers around in the date. It really doesn't or shouldn't mean something super significant. And while I agree on the basis of like the New Year's Eve and New Year's Day holidays are super overhyped, it's just one of those classically overhyped holidays where it shouldn't necessarily be some extreme ceremony. If you already are in the mental space where you consider it something worthy of a ceremony, that can be a powerful tool for actually changing something that you want to change that would make you a better person. And most people just buy into it, and then like before the first month of the new year is even over, they're gone. They're well on their way back to the norm. They've regressed to the mean. And for those people I say, haha. But I've been, steadily improving in a variety of different ways well before any turn of the year or turn of the decade or whatever. And I still can see the value in deciding, this year is going to be different than last year for whatever reason, and trying to go forward and making something, a concerted effort to change something about your life or about your personality or about your character or about your physique or anything, about your schedule, about your home life, your work life. And I think I already talked about this it might have even been the first mod stream of the year. But one of the things that I mentioned during one mod stream's opener was that I felt like I had disproportionately answered questions, requests, made promises, made plans in a way that would leave me an out. And it wasn't a conscious decision. It wasn't like, I know I need this out so that I can say, oh, well, in case I don't end up doing it, I already told you there's a chance that it doesn't happen, which is basically what I mean by leaving myself an out. I don't think that was a conscious decision, but it was one of those things where I was over-analyzing and overthinking certain concepts, and I was coming away from it thinking there's obviously a chance where whatever I'm saying doesn't happen, and I should build in some sort of understanding of why that must be or why that might end up happening that way. When in reality, I really should have just focused on trying to make something, make the most out of my time. And then if I fail to meet the demand, or if I fail to keep that promise or fail to concede that goal or whatever the case may be, if I fail in some way, treat it as a failure, but learn from it, make it productive. As opposed to building in the expectation, the tacit expectation that I may not get around to it. It's classic shit like, yeah, I'll do that voice acting for you if I remember, or I'll try to get that done. I'll try. That's a classic fallacy for me. I'll try. I'm going to try to do that. Like, yes, I am going to try, but if I just say I'm going to do that, then that creates a very different expectation in not only your head as the person the imaginary person requesting something of me, it also creates a different expectation in my head, because now I've said that I'm going to. I didn't say I'm going to try. I said I'm going to do whatever. And I feel like that would be the one resolution I would make this entire year, this whole New Year's resolution thing that we were talking about before on a conceptual basis. That can be one thing that I commit to, is actually being committal with just my language, because I already do the work pretty well. I already do whatever somebody asks of me fairly consistently. There's very few promises that I've made in a tacit way or in a deliberate way. Like, there's the idea of a promise insofar as, me saying, oh yeah, I'll do that for you. And then there's me saying, I promise I will do that for you. Like, obviously one's more formal than the other based on the language. But either way, there's, regardless of how you consider it, very few times I don't live up to my word. Maybe there's some cases where, like, you could argue for or against that concept, but I feel like I'm pretty good about that. I usually get the work done pretty well. So that alone kind of qualifies me out of worrying about being dependable. And so there's no reason for me to build in the expectation that I may not be dependable just based on my speech, right? So that's where I get into that weird headspace where I'm thinking, like, why am I even bothering to say I'm going to try to do that, or I will do that unless this happens, or there's no real need for that. And part of it is just classic information control as well, which sounds weird to say when you're just trying to talk to somebody. But like when you're giving them some information, you want to make sure that the information you're giving them makes sense. And you don't want to overload them with too much information that isn't really relevant. And that would be like, you set the expectation that you're going to do a task. They know that if something comes up, they can expect that you'll do the task later than expected initially. Like, you don't need to really tell them that, because if they're a reasonable human being, or if they're even just like have any IQ floating around in their head, they're going to know what to do in that situation. They're going to have that expectation, but not like, if you front load with that, then that creates a very different interaction in their head where they're like, this person's already telling me that they might not be able to do this thing in the same breath that they're telling me they're going to do this thing. And that's obviously not what you want to do. So anyway, hopefully I explained that well enough. But the long story short is, by giving that concrete example of something that I plan on doing differently, that I am going to do differently, that I'm committing to doing differently this year, I hope that I have given a concrete example as well of what you can do with this sort of mindset change. You don't really need an excuse to change something, and you could change something in March or in December or in November or whatever. You don't need to change in January or in anticipation of a new year, or you don't even need to change after your birthday or anything like that. Nothing really in association with the calendar is required for a change. But what you can do is use the fact that mentally you're resetting your own mental calendar in some way, shape, or form. And you can use that to your advantage in this case by saying, this past year, because this is how we usually think in years anyway, this past year was good or bad because of X or Y, or this element of my personality was subpar for this year, and I really noticed it recently. So for this coming year, I'm going to change that, or next year I'm going to change that. It can be a powerful mental tool to trick you into doing work you may not have been able to easily or as easily convince yourself to do. And so it's really just about figuring out what you actually will do and what is reasonable for you to do. And I think nothing really gets people in the headspace to even think about that more than a new year, usually, or some other change of the calendar, like I mentioned, birthdays and stuff, or anniversary of some sort of event, positive or negative. And so maybe that can be something that helps you guys out. I don't know. But as sort of cliche as the whole concept actually is, I do still think you can get some value out of it, which is why I went on that little rant there. But you guys are here for rants. That's what DADCAW is. It's just me talking, trying to get better at talking so that maybe the rants have some utility, but still ranting nonetheless. So, what else did I want to mention? Well, I've been working on Todborne still. That has not changed. New Year, same project. It's really funny is I tend to do this every single year. For the past couple of years, I've been working on Colin's birthday-related projects every December into January. And this one has had a pretty lengthy development cycle already, considering it was also something that I worked on partway through 2019, as well as obviously in December 2018 and January 2019. So to still be working on it is, I don't think it's really that big of a deal in theory, but it's one of those things that definitely makes me wonder what I should be doing, if it's sunken cost or what. But I think there is a value in the project. I think it is something that I'm happy to work on. So in that sense, I don't think it's that big of a deal. But it is one of those things that, like, you ever find yourself coming back to the same project over and over again. In this case, it's seasonal based on my brother's birthday. But I wonder if at some point in the near future or far future, I will find out that, or come to the realization anyway, that it was not really worth all of the time and effort that I put into it. But I think just the quality of the project itself will justify all of the effort. And, well, not that alone necessarily. Also, the lessons I learn along the way are incredibly valuable. And I do think that just based on that, when you consider that lens, you get a whole different set of values. Because what I'm actually doing with Todborne is so unique compared to my other work. I'm not inventing entirely new tech trees yet for anything other mod. Like, obviously, I plan to for Hydra. But in Todborne, I invented 2 new tech trees, made significantly different, significantly distinct gameplay changes, and gave them distinct personalities, not only between themselves, but also between, you can't really draw a concrete comparison besides pointing to individual mechanics between the anime and the Zerg, or the police and the Terran. Like, the Terran have repair and add-ons, and their workers build like SCVs build. And the anime build like Zerg do, and they have the hatchery lair hive thing, but they don't have larvae, they don't have creep, they don't have eggs, they don't morph units from other units. They train more like conventional units, like Terran and Protoss factories. So, like, there's in some ways it's like a medley, it's a mishmash, but I think it comes together relatively nicely. So I'm not really that unhappy with it. And it's one of those things where I'm getting a different lesson, I'm getting different experience than I would doing anything else. Like, because it's also a zany project, I'm trying to figure out how to not obfuscate the comedy that's intrinsic or meant to be intrinsic in the experience of just playing. I'm trying to communicate hilarity through gameplay, as opposed to just doing so through dialogue, which is what I mostly did beforehand. Like, I would have dumb unit responses or something, but other than that, you wouldn't really have too much. Whereas now the graphics are all over the place, but in a way where it still is readable, at least for me. And I'm obviously open to making concerted efforts to improve readability for particular problematic units or whatever. And there's just so much of that stuff that you don't normally get out of any modding experience. Like, I could work on a total conversion that would be serious in tone, but I wouldn't really be doing anything different when it comes to trying to come up with a good profile for a unit than what I'm doing when I'm trying to come up with unit responses for any given hero or new unit in an existing project like Hydra or in Consummate, which are not total conversions, obviously. And so that's one of those things where I think, pretty much the closest corollary would be Ahmed's Adventure, which I worked on briefly in 2019, around Q3, with the intent of obviously making that famous last name map in full toilet. And then I realized, well, there's still a lot of mod work and engine work that would need to be accomplished before I can actually make the proper project. So rather than sinking a bunch of cost into that, I'll wait until the engine upgrades are complete and then reassess the project whether or not it's worthwhile. And maybe that's what the secret, actually, because going back to one of the earlier comments that I made, like, obviously I do think the whole point of this other tangent was that the experience of making Todborne has taught me more unique lessons than I would get anywhere else. Like, even the corollary of working on Ahmed's Adventure, that's still based around StarCraft, and a lot of the humor is based around StarCraft stuff. You got the whole StarCraft 2 shit in there, the whole, like, factions in that, and you have a bunch of other things that are playing off of either vanilla StarCraft 1, Brood War StarCraft 1, or any of the StarCraft 2 plots or characters. There's a lot of stuff that plays off of that or is a parody of that. And that's fine, but you don't really get a whole lot of brand new, unique world building or attempting to tell a completely unique story with no old assets, pretty much, in both a story and audio-visual sense. So that's more along the lines of what Todborne is. It's not really a total conversion in a sense, because I haven't replaced the Protoss and I haven't replaced the terrain, and I haven't replaced the user interface. So there's a lot of things missing for it to be a real total conversion, but it's a significant conversion in a way that no other project in my roster ever will be or ever could be, in at least as of the time of recording. So in that sense, I think Todborne really does justify its own existence and justifies the time I'm spending on it. But when you look at, you know, the end user experience, I think, is also going to be significantly distinct. And again, going back to the whole whether or not there is a sunken cost fallacy here at play, maybe, but I also have an excuse to work on this project, and that is I need to make a birthday present for my brother. So at the end of the day, like, I would be working on something anyway. It might as well be something that pushes me in a brand new direction that I'm not really ever going to go unless I'm working on a project that is this or is like this. And again, I don't have any projects like this currently. And so I think it all comes full circle. It was a little bit of a meandering way to get there in the way that I was explaining it. I hadn't quite made the realization or made the connection there myself until partway through that last tangent. But when you think about it like that, if you're going to work on a project for your brother's birthday project anyway, then you might as well do something unconventional that you aren't already doing. Because if you're already doing it, then why reinvent it at that point? Why do it again? If you're, well, I guess reinventing would imply that you're doing something significantly different. So why not do something significantly different? Why do something that's basically the same thing? And, you know, there's an argument to be made for doing that to refine your skills in that, you know, working in that environment. But I don't really see that argument in play for trying to do something significantly distinct. You're improving your skills in familiar ways because you're still designing interactive RTS levels and you're trying to design tech trees and upgrades and unit responses and all this other stuff, all the components of an actual unit or an actual race, insofar as you're trying to make it legitimate and fun to play and rewarding to play and skill expression still being a core component of what you're doing. You're just doing it in a very unorthodox manner overall. Like, the whole project is kind of unorthodox in that sense. And I think that that's pretty standard fare, or rather the opposite of standard fare. It's something where the standard approach is to do what you already do or what you're already comfortable with, and, you know, do something that's like very basic and you know, you're not really putting a whole lot of effort into making it distinct or unique if you're just trying to shit out a project for a birthday present. You know, in theory, this is way more work or effort or whatever. Like, if you totaled out the amount of hours that I work on Todborne and then you converted that into, if I was getting paid like a bare minimum wage for all those hours, what present could I purchase for him in that context? Yeah, it's probably, you know, over the value of what you would expect out of a birthday present. And perhaps it won't even be up his alley in a sense, so it might not have subjective value at the end of the day. We have to wait and see about that one. But I think it does justify its time. Like, I think it justifies the time invested in it, just on the basis of being an interesting sort of project that you can learn a lot from as a developer, as a designer, as a thinker. Like, just thinking about how to conceptualize RTS concepts. This has taught me a lot. And there are indeed some shared characteristics between it too. I don't mean to make it sound like it's completely different, but there are certainly certain things that are completely distinct, completely removed, and I think that's cool. So I suppose that draws that conversation to a close. Now, Fagudo actually asked me to talk about something completely different on a DADCAW. I don't think I can properly set it up here. It would be more the speed of trying to explain, like, a by design video or something would probably be useful for that. And that's actually one of the other things that I probably didn't mention in the pilot episode for DADCAW. Is one of the things that I really like about DADCAW is it forces me to talk about something, even if I have maybe nothing to say initially, or I think I have nothing to say. Like, obviously I always have something to say. I talk endlessly. So when you're looking at it from that perspective, there's going to be times where I breach or broach a topic, right? And I'm thinking, you know, I could go on for this for like 30 minutes, or I could really come up with some compelling material for this. And that could be a podcast discussion in the future. That could be a podcast topic, or that could be the topic of a by design video, which is usually when I have like listed out some notes and I'm a little bit more collected than a DADCAW. That's what separates by design from DADCAW in general, besides the fucking overlay that I use. So, and it's also more focused in general because it's usually about one particular concept that I've thought enough about to feel like I'm able to make a video on that. So that's where I think DADCAW's strengths are, is that I'll definitely say something once a week. At least one topic will be talked about once a week, but also I will be encouraged to make by design videos, or, you know, turn a lot of these things into podcast topics down the line, whenever Mesk and I link up for that. and it will just contribute to work that wouldn't normally get done or thoughts that wouldn't normally get explored. And I think that's cool. So anyway, enough scratching my own back about that. But like I said, Fagudo did come up with a concept, and I think he was trying to explain, he wanted me to explain crowpilling or something. I don't remember where he wrote that. He might have wrote it in the gay channel or something. But at the bottom line of that, or at the end of that, what I can't say about that without having the full context of the message is the idea that you would like, crowpilling is just like a dumb name, like a meme inside joke name for the idea that you would go through and suddenly become aware of many of the things that I say on a daily basis, or that I like thoughts that I already hold. You would suddenly come to the realization that the games industry is terrible and that good games are like a fairy tale or something like, and it sounds all doom and gloom, but obviously like I'm a pretty happy guy, so it can't be that bad. But anyway, you look past that and you're thinking like, you know, how do I even really explain that? Like, it doesn't really sound like something you would want to actually experience. And you'd almost have to be a really, really good salesman in order to properly get people to agree to even want to do that. In order to sell that concept, you have to be a real good salesman, because what I'm basically explaining is you're not going to enjoy games anymore, at least not to the same degree. The problem with crowpilling, I think, and this is probably something that we can talk about in the podcast, because I don't think it's something that really explores or it warrants exploration in a by design video. It's more like some topic that we would broach in a podcast, and then it would start off like a whole tangent that we would run with for like an hour or something. I am interested in hearing Mesk's take on it, but I feel like for actual game players, it's valuable for very few consumers. It's much more valuable for developers to get crowpilled, because what they will then do is there's a significantly higher chance that they will take something out of that will improve them as a developer, and they will make better content for other gamers to have. And that would be like the only way we can improve standards globally enough to make a difference is if enough developers get crowpilled and then decide, okay, I'm going to go and abide by these principles. I'm not going to give up as a game designer. I'm going to continue to pour my heart and soul into this. I'm just going to do it in a way where it is actually going to improve the content and the quality of the products that are available. And I don't think that that's realistically going to happen on a large enough scale to matter, but that doesn't stop me from doing it or working within it or trying to live by those standards myself. So in that sense, I think it is useful for developers, but I don't think it's really useful for gamers. Like, there's no content for them to play once they reach these realizations that is going to make it. What it would happen is if you could educate like the masses on why Transformers as a franchise of movies is bad and low quality and like lowest common denominator material. Once they're educated enough, then they can have a greater appreciation for high quality movies that are not the things that Transformers movies are. They might be able to appreciate something out of that they couldn't get before they were educated. That's pretty much the extent of what crowpilling would do, except there's nothing for them to enjoy. Everything is Transformers in this example. Every game, pretty much. Like, there's very few games, especially new ones, that come out that you could even say are worthwhile to investigate. And most people come into games looking for single player experiences. There are obviously very popular multiplayer titles, and if you count the definition of gamer that includes mobile gamers or Facebook gamers, then obviously most of those games are multiplayer. But when you consider like actual people who buy consoles or buy PC games or whatever, these people who are looking for content are looking for single player content. Maybe they play some multiplayer now and then, but I guarantee you it's like, you know, either sports franchise games like Madden or whatever, or it's the classical single player like loves Mass Effect and shit. So there's nothing for these people to play that is actually going to stimulate the senses and be a replacement for the low quality entertainment that they were getting before. So you can't really get any value out of being crowpilled as a consumer, I don't think. So I mean, obviously there is value insofar as you no longer allow yourself to be entertained or satisfied by shit that's low quality. That is called having standards, of course, and usually it's rare. But even outside of that, I still don't see a realm where you could come away as a gamer, as a consumer, and feel empowered to make better purchasing decisions. You would just feel empowered to make no purchasing decisions, because there's no game out there that will really satisfy that, most likely. Like, obviously there's Brood War, but now you have to play the remaster to play multiplayer, so that doesn't count, because obviously the remaster is low quality. Not just the visuals, but everything around it, performs much worse, and disk space, XD, and all this other stuff. So, like, really thinking about it, what games can you play? I mean, Brood War was pretty much the fucking defining factor. So really, you just have to find friends who agree with you about these standards, like what I've done with the channel, and you play CSGO and Brood War 161, and you have these like little niche communities. That's pretty much all you can do if you're Crowpilled as a gamer, as a consumer who's not interested in making your own content. That's all you can do, as far as I can tell, anyway. So, anyway, hopefully that was enough coverage for the topic for Fagudo to be satisfied, but for sure, it seems like Crowpilling is going to remain an educational material as opposed to something that can have any sort of mass impact in a positive sense. And yeah, that'll be it for me. Bye.